Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Can you tell what it is yet? No, it's not a repotting video, although it is. What it is yes, I'm going to repot these orchids, but it's the thoughts that go into it. These are all unknowns. These have never been out of their pot for me. So I don't know what's in there, and some of them haven't got see-through pots. That was repotted by somebody I know, and I know they used rubbish bark, so it's coming out of there because it's not doing very well. So the paraphernalia is ready. Wire cutters, should I need them, although I doubt it. Pliers, I probably don't need them, but I don't want to have to run off and get them if I do. Scissors, soaking in alcohol, I use that stuff, just rubbing alcohol. It does the job basically. And I know it's clean. So scissors were sharpened. No dull blades in this house. If it isn't sharp, it's not a blade. And new to the paraphernalia is that. Now that's my hydrogen peroxide 3% in a new little spray bottle, so I can actually use it now. Because before I was trying to pour it over and most of it just went down the sink and was useless. So now I've got a little atomizer spray, so should I feel the need, the roots and things can get a good going over now. Yay! So that's new. Knowing me, I'll probably forget to use it. And then we've got some moss soaking. Now until I get these out of their pots, I don't know what media I'm going to use, because I don't know what roots I'm working with till I see them. And there might not be any, in which case we'll probably use quite a bit of the moss. So it's there soaking ready. And I've got some chunky bark because I know I will need some of that, even if it's only to put in the bottom of the pot for crocking. So that I do know I need. And I probably will use some of the sponge rock or giant perlite, whatever you want to call it. Can't get that in the UK anymore. Stupid regulations. That's for mixing my media in. I like having glass because I know it's clean when I start. And well, what's the other essential? Yeah, beer. I'll probably forget that and it'll get warm. Like my coffee usually gets cold, the beer gets warm. Okay, so I'll get some plants out the way, and I'll probably make a start on this little thing. I'll show you what it is in a minute, but let's clear some space out. Those are the two Dendrobium phalaenopsis that look almost the same but aren't quite, and both of those haven't been repotted, and I will be taking a bit of a risk repotting them with flower spikes on, but given what they're in, they're coming out. The flower spikes have been on there a while. If I lose them, it's not the end of the world. I will get some more one day, but I'll save the plant and the plant will do well. So this is a little coelogyne, and it was called Orchid, I think that was, but it's now called Nitida, which is a lot easier to say. And as I said, this has never been out of its pot, but it has produced a nice new growth, a bigger bulb than the others. I mean, obviously that's a very young plant. I won't be seeing any flowers on that for a while. So let's get it out and see what we're looking at here. Well, I do not see an extensive root system so far. It hasn't got much of a root system at all. But then I don't know what sort of root system it's even supposed to have. So, yeah. I'll clean it off and come back, as I usually do. Okay, so here we are then. That's I don't know whether that's a reasonable root system for this plant or not. I'm not a knowledgeable person on coelogynes, even though I've got a few, but one thing that is blatantly obvious is that old pseudo bulb that's only just hanging on there needs to come off. Yeah, I mean that bulb was doing no good at all basically. So we have some roots. I must admit I was expecting more roots under the latest growth. Whereas the main root system is on the previous bulb. So maybe this type of plant pushes out new roots after the bulbs mature. I mean, some Cattleyas do that, that's not unheard of. So as I said, it is a young plant, and I'll get it in some, I think that can go in a mixture of small bark with some sphagnum moss. That would suit its roots. As you can see, some of these roots are quite fibrous, yeah, and they are fine roots, so they'll do well in a fine mix. There's no good planting that on stuff like that. It's not going to work. So that's why I said this is more the decision making process. Those have got very fine roots, and I mean a lot of coelogynes are at least semi-terrestrial if you think about it. You know, a lot of them are ground growing, leaf littery type things, but the plant itself is clean. There's no signs of any rots or bugs or anything like that. So basically I'm not going to waste my hydrogen peroxide sterilising something that just doesn't need sterilising. Yeah, so anyway, now that is the hard bit. I've now got to go and try and find a pot suitable for that. I'll be back. Okay, I found a diddy little pot, and I've put a few chunky bits of bark in the bottom there just for sort of drainage. Dr. Moats, as of Moats founders, yeah, in the States, Florida I believe, or down that way. I listened intently to a talk by that guy on YouTube, and a point of order, shall we say, if you've got a pot that's that deep, yeah, and you put that much crocking in it, you've just turned it into a pot that deep. So if you can get hold of them, if that's what you plan on doing on a regular basis, get the pans, the pan-shaped pots that are actually wider than they are deep, and then you can use your media right down into the bottom. Because the idea of doing that basically is saying that, you know, this bottom part of the pot is not really for the roots, it's just for drainage. Now I know that some roots will actually get down in there, but they'll find it a bit empty when they get there, won't they? Yeah. But as this is a shallow rooted plant, I'm quite happy with that. It's also a very young plant as well. So I've got some small bark, and I've had a look through that, and you'll have to excuse that racket outside, but somebody's got an angle grinder going, shattering my piece, frightening the cats. Cheers mate. Still, when you've got work to do, you've got work to do, and that sort of noise you can put up with. Men at work and all that stuff. Right, so I tear my moss up quite small, the idea being it can distribute itself in amongst the small bark pieces in a much more orderly fashion than great long dangly strangly bits, if you know what I mean. So I want quite a lot of moss on this, because it is a fine rooted system, and it's a coelogyne, so they don't tend to like to dry out. They do tend to like to be moist. But if you go onto Google and just put in coelogynes, you will find a very, very useful site that comes up with practically all the species coelogynes that you are liable to find in cultivation, with comprehensive notes, and the guys even put a grading system on there, a star system, which actually says why something gets 5 stars or why it only gets 3 stars, in his opinion obviously. But it's a lovely site if you're into coelogynes. It's worth a look. I suppose I ought to have had a look about this one, but I probably did once, which was part of the reason. Now again, with my logic, that's the back of the plant, that's the new growth, yeah? So, new growth for me against the side of the pot. The reason being, when I put some media in round the back, I can push it over towards that, knowing it's okay. And the more delicate roots at the front of the plant don't get whacked around so much. Now I'm going to take this up halfway up, or part way up the bulbs, because it's a coelogyne and it would naturally grow that way. It's not a Cattleya where the bulbs would sit on a branch or a trunk, yeah, and the roots would anchor themselves and get in amongst the moss and the other bits and bobs that were on the branch. This is more likely to be found in sort of leaf litter and stuff like that. And as such, it wouldn't be sat right on the surface. It would actually have some of its bulbs lower down. So there, that'll do. And notice I'm not pressing it down, I'm just going to do that to settle it. When I water that, that will get well settled in. A bit more now. See, as I tapped it, it went down a little bit, so add a bit more around the top. And notice I use mainly bark round the base of the bulbs without so much sphagnum. That will allow that part of the plant to dry easier. Okay, that'll do for that. And don't forget your label. Always make sure your label goes back in your plant. Now that will just get an absolute drowning now because this is dry. I know that moss is wet, but I did wring it out first, so it's only slightly damp. So that is dry, and this bark takes a bit of wetting when it's new. So that'll have an absolute soak now, and then it'll be left to drain and it will go back out in its home, wherever I decide that will be. Okay, let's get another one out of the pot. Okay, for a complete contrast, at least I hope so, if there's some roots in there for us to actually look at, this is a mini Paphiopedilum. I mean, you see the size of my hand, that's it. That's the size of the leaves, but the flower itself, relative to that plant, is quite large. This is Paphiopedilum delanantii, and it's the album form, so virtually pure white, or a lot of white anyway. So let's get this out of the pot and see what we find then. I'm dreading this because if you haven't got good roots on a path, you're not going to have a path for very long. And as suspected, not brilliant, but I've seen worse. Okay, right, well, now you can see the difference, and that smells. That's got that mushroomy, damp cellar smell. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, so that was starting to go. So this was a good time to get this out then, wasn't it? Okay, right, roots on this then. Hairy, very, very fine hairs all over them, but the ones that are there are firm. Nothing is rotten on that plant. Woohoo! I'm surprised. But there are two reasons for repotting this. One of them was whiffy media, which I had suspected for a while, which is why I wanted to get on with it. And these are a nuisance for me because they try and hold on to their lower leaves, which means you try and pot them like where my thumbnail is. Well, that's just not very good. It needs to get down in the pot further, because up above these bottom two leaves are little nodes. You might just be able to see one there. That's where new roots are due to come out. Well, if they come out above the leaves, they don't tend to do very well, because if they don't get down in the media pretty damn quick, and those of you with good eyes can spot there's a few little bugs in there, so that one can have the hydrogen peroxide. So I'm just going to give that a wash, and I'll give it a spray as well. And I know it might sound a little dangerous, but those bottom two leaves are coming off and it's going deeper in its pot, and hopefully it will shoot some new roots, because it hasn't had any new roots for a while. I can tell by where these all come from the base of the plant. Those are its original seedling roots, and at least they're still viable. Okay, I'll be back when I've cleaned it up and sprayed it and rinsed it off and all that stuff. Okay, here we go then. I've taken the bottom two leaves off. I didn't want to get too close in case I damage any of the little nodes where hopefully some new roots are going to come out. And that's going to sit quite high. Those bottom two leaves are going to be basically touching the medium, but not packed tight. I don't want to keep that constantly suffocatingly wet with no air, but it will have media around that joint. Okay, as I said, as Paphiopedilums go, given the plant size, that's 4 good roots there. I'm pleased. I can't see proper what I call growing root tips, which are normally a sort of fawny colour, like a sort of yellowy brown root tip that don't have the fine hairs on. So although those are active roots, they're not actively growing, and I want to see some new roots on this. It has actually just got the start of a new leaf coming in there. That's 2, 4, 6, that'll be 7. The next thing is probably going to be a bud. We shall see. So anyway, I've got my diddy little pot. Yeah, it's a clear pot, I know, but what I do is when I've planted it, it'll go in there, so it's not in a clear pot anymore, but I can take it out and yes it is. So I can still see my roots, but because it's a terrestrial, it'll get its roots in the dark, which is what it likes. Okay, this mix is again small bark, some moss, and I've actually put some sponge rock in here this time. Okay, so a little bit in the bottom. I don't need much because these roots point downwards and I don't want to bend them. Okay, and I still need to get, I'm going to have to move some of that to allow that longest root to get right down in the base of the pot. I want the plant in the middle, then whichever side the new growth comes out of, if it eventually does, it's got room, whichever side it decides to go. Wouldn't it be marvellous if it put one out each side? Yeah, dream on. You show me one that's ever done that. From a seedling, single growth Paphiopedilum that actually put out 2 growths at the same time. Go on, show me one. Go on. Dare you. You just won't find them because they're not fast growers. They are painfully slow. That's just how they are. And if you want to grow paths, then you've got to live with that. And the idea is that, you know, when I do get a new growth, that probably won't be until after this growth has actually bloomed. If it does. I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't. I always say that if it does. It will. Let's be brave, shall we, and say you will bloom. I know you will. Okay, again, this needs to be packed down a little firmer than I would normally do. And the reason is, it is a terrestrial, and it would normally be growing down through the leaf litter into the top layer of soil. Yeah? And as such, its method of holding itself upright in the wind and all that sort of stuff is to have its roots in the dirt, like a normal plant would. So it's not going to be hanging off a tree. Okay, so I'm just trying to remove some of the moss so that the stuff that goes around the base of that plant is just bark. As I said, I want something for new roots to get into, but I don't want to suffocate the stem of the plant and possibly cause some rotting. So that's probably about right. If any roots come out now, they will have they would have had something to grow into. That's trying to press down too hard on a tiny little pot. When you've got great club-fisted hands like mine, doing little tiny stuff is not as easy as it might be for some. Let me just get some pure bark around the base of that plant. I want the base of the plant in media, but I don't want it to stay wet. You can see my logic there. So that if a root does come out, it will come out into something, not into thin air. They tend to dry up pretty damn quick if they come out into thin air, and then you've lost a root. And you don't get many on these. You know, they're precious. So I think that'll do it. I've got enough media up round the neck of that plant, providing I don't knock it over again. And if a new root or two would show its face, it's got something to get into quickly, but the base of the plant isn't going to stay wet, because that will be the first bit of bark to dry off. And should such time as a new root come out, I can always just tease away some of that bark and replace it with normal mix. So there he is. He's, as you can see, he's sat quite deep in, but it is deliberate. I did want media around the base of that plant, albeit drying fast type media. And then if a root does come out, there is one nubbin I can see, it gets straight into the pot. So again, that will now get a good soaking because the media is dry, and then back out in his little place. I've got to find a new place for this one because I wasn't happy with where it was. It kept getting forgotten, and You don't forget to water these very often or you have no plant. These do not like to go bone dry. And where it was, it just kept getting forgotten, poor little thing. So I'll put him somewhere where he won't get forgotten this time. It's a dear little plant. It's a pretty plant. Lovely leaves. And it has a very nice bloom, if it ever does. Sorry, when it ever does. Okay, so that's that one. Let's move on to something a bit bigger. That's the two diddy ones done. Okay, and now for something completely different. This has failed the smelly test, so the media is breaking down. The plant is not a happy plant. It has got one new growth. Its previous new growth decided it was going to do a funny patterned leaf, which meant the roots weren't happy. Or it could have a virus, but you know me and viruses. I only believe it when I really see it. And that leaf's been like that a long time. If that was a virus, that would have spread to the rest of the plant by now. That's what they do. The one thing you can guarantee with viruses is they do work pretty damn quick. Anyway, let's get this one out of the pot. I don't expect to find much on the bottom of this, which is probably why it's not very well. We shall see. Oh, I suppose you need to know what it is. It's that. Brassolalia Cattleya and its golden mule orient. And it does have a beautiful flower. It did actually bloom once, but since then the plant's just gone downhill for a reason that will probably become obvious as soon as it comes out of here. I mean, you never know, there might be something in here eating the flipping roots off. Unlikely, but possible. Now these are what I call typical looking Cattleya roots that are not long for this world. They look okay until you repot the plants and then you put them in some new media because you thought, oh, those roots are okay, I won't cut them off, and then they promptly die on you in your nice new media, messing it up for you. So there's not a lot that's much good here. I know that might seem odd, but that's how it is. And the other thing is, quite honestly, there's a large part of that plant that is doing no good at all. So it's coming off. Aren't I brutal? Should have cut it really, but as it was nearly hanging off anyway, I will trim the wound so there is a nice clean one. And I may put a bit of cinnamon on that before I bury it in some wet stuff. Right, so that is now a much smaller plant, but a fair few of the roots on this bit, those roots are useless. They might seem okay, but they're not. They're going to die. Trust me. Doing these Cattleya things long enough to know the difference between a root that's going to make it. Now there's still a lot of these roots that are not much good. So as a precaution, I'm going to wash all this off. I'm going to give it a good spray, debug it. While I'm at it, I will desheath it. These sheaths on mature bulbs serve no purpose. On a young growth, they do serve a purpose. They stop the bright light and the sun getting on it before it's capable of coping with that level. It also helps keep the bugs off the nice new growth. But on older growths, they just provide hiding places for bugs. They don't serve any purpose. I mean, if I get this in a light that's bad enough to damage a mature bulb, then the chances are it's going to damage the whole plant. So, you know, I'll take that risk. So we've desheathed it, or as near as I can, down to next to nothing. Yeah, this is a strange one. I mean, this is effectively not made its mind up yet. I mean, this growth here, which was the one that the new growth is coming off of, is blatantly a two-leaf bulb, and yet the previous two were single-leaf bulbs. And the new one, I'm not sure it's made its mind up yet, whether it's going to be 1 or 1.5 or 2. But it's not growing vigorously, so whatever that new growth is going to do is probably going to be some sort of compromise. So anyway, I'll clean that up, and by the time I've finished trimming, there's not going to be a lot left. And then we can find a nice, very small little pot. That's what this process is all about. That's going on a mount. I'm not going to put it in a pot. there's not going to be much of that root system left, and it's been in a pot and it didn't do very well. So I'm going to try it on a mount. So that'll take me a little while to set up because I've got to get wire, I've got to find a piece of bark, sterilise it, do all that sort of stuff and trim all these roots up. So I'll be back in a bit, and then that one's going to go on a mount. Yeah, I mean that's got Brassivola in it, I can tell, and other stuff. Yeah, I think that'll do better on a mount. Decision made, I'll go and get all my bits. Okay, I said there wouldn't be much left, but the roots that are left are good enough to tie to a mount. I will still be relying on this new growth round here, pushing out new roots from here. Now my plan is to push it that way onto the mount so that those two bulbs are against the bark, nice and flat. You can imagine it like that. And the new growth is pointing away from the mount. And any roots that come out of the base of that will go straight down into the lower moss and straight onto the bark. So that lends itself quite nicely, shape-wise, to go on a mount. And in addition to that, those roots fan out really well as in addition. That's a bonus. Normally I have to tweak them and bend them, but those roots will just fan out nicely and get going. It's a Blue Peter mount because this is one that has been used before and it was ready to go, so I've just sterilised it. It's already got its hook on there. It's a little small, but there again, I don't even know if that plant's going to make it, and if it does, that bark is not the strongest of bark. I mean, that's a little piece of English oak, so it's wafer thin, not like the cork bark, and it will last a couple of years. Now if by then the plant's doing really well, this bark will disintegrate. I will be able to break it into pieces, and then with the roots still attached to those pieces can be placed on a bigger piece of bark. So it's like remounting without dismounting. Does that make sense? Yeah, I suppose so. About as much sense as you're going to get out of me today. Right, mounting process. Decide where your plant's going to go. Yeah, that'll fit quite nicely there, and most of those roots will be in some moss, at least near their base. Yep, that's going to work. Right, moss. Now for mounting, I don't get rid of all the water because it helps it stick to the mount, quite honestly. It helps me do the job. I don't want this deep. Let me explain. I'd like the roots to have air behind them, which when they're sitting on moss is not that easy, and if the bed is too deep, the roots will stay wet too long. So I need some air to be able to get in round behind the roots, as well as the fact that they're going to get a little bit of moss over the front of them as well. So let's see if that sits nicely then. It's probably about enough moss. I'll just press it in a little bit, it'll sink into the bark and hopefully stay there. It doesn't always. And then that plant will sit like that, and those roots fan out actually quite nicely. Yep. So a little bit more moss over the top, but not a lot. It's a Cattleya. I don't want to bury the roots. They're supposed to have some air in around them. And when you start playing with sphagnum moss and Cattleya roots, you've got a recipe for rotting. So just a little bit around the top of the roots so that they can still dry reasonably quick. I know that's perched in the air at the moment, but that's just going to get wrapped. And that's about it. I don't really, I'll just put a little tiny bit round there, round underneath the new growth, to try and encourage the little blighter to push some new roots out. Which if it does, the plant will make it. If that new growth can put some new roots out relatively quickly, then that's a rescued Cattleya. I seem to have a lot of those. But the numbers are going down all the time. The numbers of rescued Cattleyas are getting quite low now, so I am getting better at getting it right, if you know what I mean. So no bark or anything this time. We need some of this stuff. In fact, we need lots of this stuff. It'll look like far too much, but I'd rather waste a metre of this than run out halfway through wrapping around there and have to sort of tie it off and start again with another piece. There's nothing worse than that when you're trying to mount something. Now, where's my little groove gone? Oh, there he is. Right, slip knot, or whatever you like to do. I start with a slip knot with a reasonable end to it because I need to be able to tie on that in a minute. And with my big clumsy hands, I like nice long ends to tie with. Right, now this is where my third hand will come in really useful because it would stop the stuff falling on the floor for a start. Little tight. Right. So slip knot very carefully over so that it doesn't knock everything off, and then up round the base of the plant, and that, yeah, see, it's not as good as I wanted. Never mind, come on, pull tight. See, I can use my thumb now. Once I've got the wire stuff, the fishing line in the right place, my thumb holds the plant in place and a lot of the moss. And then once we've got that where we want it, we wrap. 1, 2, 3. Now that's more than enough to hold that plant. So I can now start to zigzag back up to the top of the plant, but then I'm going to do something which I wouldn't always do, but in this case I am. I'm going to go between the new growth and the two old bulbs at the back. And the reason is that's where the secure loop will be. This will be the loop that really holds the plant on, because it will basically sit across the top of the two bulbs at the back and hold the plant firm. Okay, now never too tight. You're not trying to cut the plant in half. It's not a garrote, it's just a gentle tie, and that will actually do. I can put a bit more moss up around the base of that new growth in a minute, once I've got something to poke it in with. And then I don't know how you tie off, but I basically thread through and bundle all these together and pull them tight in one go. And then I've got something to tie against as well. I use a reef knot, which if you don't know what it is, it's right over left, left over right. And when you pull that tight, it does not come undone. Okay, so that's that done. Okay, now I'm just going to get a little bit of moss up round under that new growth, if I can get a bit in there. That's the only place I'm prepared to have the moss right up against the plant. And hopefully that will push on. So there we go. As I say, the roots are fanned out across that area. You can see them through the moss in places, so they can get some air, and some of the ends are hanging out in the air anyway, so that should dry reasonably quickly, and in the meantime it can be hydrated enough, and hopefully that little growth will kick on, push out some new roots, and probably the next new growth is, well, whichever side of that one it comes out, it'll be fine, because it will be able to get down onto the mount. You never know, it might even push out one towards the back there. We shall see. Okay, so that changed my mind halfway through and did a mount. I wasn't planning on that. Okay, that's that one. Okay, these next two, I'm not going to actually film repotting these. All I really want to show you is what they look like when they come out, because it's unknown. Now I'm hoping, the fact that this has got several nice strong new growths on it, it's got a good root system, and look at what it's in. It's peat, but I've had to get used to that stuff. That's a good root system. That's what I was hoping for. It's a posh label. It's been to a show. Yeah. So as I say, I won't bore you all with teasing this out, but be it as much to say that that has a very good root system, and once I've washed all that coconutty, peaty stuff out of it, that's going to be a good root system. Well pleased with that one. Okay, let's have a look at the other one then. I don't think this one's going to be quite so satisfactory, but it's in, bearing in mind they were bought in the same place at the same time for the same price. This one's in different media, I think, and not such a good root system, but not a bad root system. I've seen a lot worse than that. That'll recover. That's not a lot of new roots, given that it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 new growths over this side of the plant. Yeah, but look at that. That's what's wrong with it. That is a solid plug. Left on, killing the roots. Look, it's a solid plug. That's what it was originally planted in. So I'm going to have to get all of that out and release the roots into something a bit better. That's a good enough root system to successfully rejuvenate the plant. And there are plenty of new little roots showing that will get down into the media once I get all this rubbish off. So that's all I really want to do with these two. As I said, I won't bore you with actually putting them in a pot under your nose. You know how to put a plant in a pot by now. There's enough videos around to do it. I just wanted to, you know, the surprise of when you take one out of a pot, bought in the same place at the same time. This one's in peat, and in the middle is that solid plug again. Yeah? So they both got that in common. But somebody decided that this one would go in peaty stuff, and this one would go in, well, God knows what that is. It's got some bark in it, and whatever it is, it's starting to break down. It's not gone, but it wouldn't be long. So anyway, I'll get on and pot those two up, and yeah, what a mess. My mum comes home now, she'll go mad, because it's her house. Yeah, so a repotting sort of video, but the idea was to go over the thought processes. Rather than just say, I'm going to repot this plant, don't make the decisions before you start. First of all, is that plant suitable to be repotted? You know? And if it needs it, then do it, by all means. But certainly on the Cattleya front, if it's in a perfect world, there's new growth or growths and nice new roots pushing out in that area. If you repot your Cattleyas at that time, they're going to make it, as long as you don't bust all the root tips off in the process. But if you're careful, they'll make it. That's just the right time. But sometimes you just have to get on with it and take the risk. And you often lose a root system on the older parts of Cattleyas. They're disturbance, they just don't like it, they dump those roots, they die. And if that's going to happen, and you know that's going to happen, why put those roots in the pot to die? You're just providing places for mould to grow and things that you don't really want. So get those older roots off. They're not going to make it. And if they do, it's incredibly rare. Okay, and like I said, I hadn't made the decision on any of these plants. These two will go in pots. Yeah, and the little Paphiopedilum was destined for a pot. It's a terrestrial. I don't think I've ever seen anybody mount one of those. But, you know, the little Cattleya type, I changed my mind. I was thinking of potting it, and then I got it out. I had a look at the roots, I had to look at the shape of the plant, and I thought, that'll do okay on a mount. And let's face it, Cattleyas like a lot of air around their roots, and they like to dry fast. And what better way to do that than on a mount? It's perfect. But I can't have all my Cattleyas on mount. Some of them weigh too much. You know, they're just, the plants are too big. But on the smaller to medium-sized cats, they do well on a mount. Okay, thanks for dropping by, and thanks for watching. And as I said, this is not a repotting video, not a how-to repot, just having a look at a repot. Because I don't do how-tos, as you all know. See you next time.